Welcome to Jet Coding. So in today's tutorial, we bring to you some of the higher order functions from JavaScript and some of the ES6 way of doing things to make your life very easy. So we are still on the data structures and algorithm, but we thought it's wise for you to at least feel how we do some of the basic stuff using the ES6 modules. So we'll talk about the spread operator, the destructuring, array destruction, object destruction. Then we look at some of the higher order functions, that is filter, reduce, map, fit, and for each. Then also talk about some of the interesting things and some of the implementation that you can implement using the ES6 module. So I think without wasting much time, we'll first of all look at what you call array, right? We might have tackled arrays from our JavaScript, our data structures and algorithm tutorials. So we're always using var, then we create, let's say, an array, then we set it to sometimes like an empty array, right? Or perhaps we pass in 1, 2, 3, 4, so that when we console, right, .log the array, we get back an array. But in actual sense, there are two ways to implement this. And before we start, I would like to briefly explain some of the ES6 ways of declaring variables. So back in the days, we used to use var to declare variables, right? So sometimes we do var, then let's say now is equal to, let's say, 12, right? Then ES6 came, right? So when ES6 came, that is ES6, that is ECMA script 2015. Yeah, when it came, we had two keywords. We had the let, right, and the const. Now, we previously were using var to declare variables. It is not efficient as using the let, right? So let me show you a difference between what I'm talking about. So we'll use the let, the const, and the var. So assuming we have a basic for loop, right? So I have a for loop, and let's use var. So var I is equal to 0. Then we do I, right, less than 5. Then we do I plus, right? Then let's do a basic console.log. So when we do a basic console.log here, so sorry, console.log I, right? We'll see that we display this, but what happened when we console.log, right, the I outside the scope of this for loop, outside the scope? Now we see that we get 5 here. I don't know if you see it, this 5. Now on the fifth iteration, the I becomes 5, right? So when you use the var to declare a variable and you call it outside the scope, right, you still get the initial, let's say the value the variable was set to before the loop ended. So we see when we console.log I outside the scope of this for loop, we get the 5. So what I mean is that when you use the var to declare a variable, the var is limited to the function scope. So assuming we had, right, a function, let's have a function, then call it, let's say, app, then let's bring all these things inside this function. So in actual sense, it shouldn't work, right? In actual sense, when we call the app, right, now we get the same thing. You see that inside this variable, the fact that this variable is inside this for loop, it is scoped to the function, right? So that is why when we call the variable outside the scope of this for loop, we still get the last value the I was set to before the loop ended, because we said when I is less than 5. So when I is 5 and less than 5, it doesn't hold, so the loop will end. So when we console.log I, we get the value, the last value the I was set to before it's, but assuming we use, right, let's, when we use let's is limited to the block, so it's scoped to the block that it is defined in, right? So when we console.log the I here, we see that the I is not visible, right? Unlike when we use the var, we see that we still get the 5. The 5 is visible outside the scope. But when we use the let, right, it is scoped to that block. So what we can take out of this is that the var, right, the var keyword is a function. So let's say it's function scoped, and the let keyword is a block scope, right? Likewise, the const. So assuming we want to declare variables that will not change over time. So we use const, right? So const, let's say pi, we all know pi is equal to 3.14, 3.142, you know, blah, blah, blah. So let's leave it like this. We know that this value will never change in our application. So we can use const to declare this variable. But assuming that, so assuming we want to change the pi to a certain value. So let's change pi to 3, to 2, and let's console.log, right? Let's console.log pi. Is it working? So we'll see that assignments to const variable. So we have a type error telling us that we cannot assign, right? I cannot assign the value to this const because we have declared it with the const. But assuming that in our application, this pi will change over time, then we can eliminate the const and use the pi, right? So that when we console.log the pi, we get the same value that we reassign. So I hope this basic difference between the var, the const, and the let is clear. So from now on, we'll be using let and const most of the time, unless you have a valid reason to use the var. You have to always stick to the let and the const. So I think it is clear now, right? Okay. So with that said, let's move on to some other concepts that are very important. So let's declare an array, right? So I initially said that there are 2 ways to declare an array. So we can do, let's say, let's, right? Let array is equal to, let's call the new array, right? The new array. In this way, when we console.log the array, we'll see that we have an empty array. So this is one way, right? This is one way of declaring an array, right? Declaring an array. And so this is one way. And the other one is that, so the other one is the normal way that we declare variable. So let's say const, right? Const, let's say array1 is equal to, then the normal traditional way. So this also gives us an array. So we have two ways of declaring an array. Either we use the array objects, or we use the normal array. So we'll be using this most of the time because this simplifies our life. So we can also do something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like this, and also dot log the array. We'll see that we'll have the array with the numbers inside. So whatever that you can do on the array, we can do the same thing. So we can do dot length, right, on the array, and we'll see the result dot length. So the length of the array is 5 if you count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is 5 in total, right? So henceforth, I just wanted to show you another way of doing it, but we'll mostly stick to this one, right? We'll mostly stick to this one. Okay, so let's look at some of the methods that we can call on an array. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 7, 8, 9. Then let's see 10, right? So one of the method that we can call on an array, right, is pop. So we can call the array, and we can call the array, and so let's say pop. You see that when we pop, right, pop will remove an item from the last index rather. So it will remove an element, right? Elements from the last index. So when we console.log the array, we'll see that we have 1 to 9. Yes. And one other method that we have is the push, right? So we want to push the 10 into the array back. So when we console.log the array, we still have our array. So notice that there is a slight difference between here. While this removed from the last index, this also append into the last index, right? Append into the last index, right? I think if you guys have any question, you can ask along the line, George or William. All right. So yeah, so whilst you use the pop to remove an element from the last index, we also use the append to insert an element into the last index, right? And we have what we call the shift, right? So when you do shift and we console.log the array, right, we'll see that we have removed 1 from the first index, right? So whilst the pop, so there's a similarity between the pop and the shift. So whilst this removes, right, an element from the last index, the shift, right, the shift will remove elements from the first index, right? So from the first index, right? And so when we console.log the array, we have removed 1, we have shifted 1 from the array. We also have the on shift, right? The on shift. So as you can see the pattern, the on shift also appends once the shift removed from the first index, the on shift also will append to the first index, right? So when you call the array, you see that the one has pop and push, and we see shift and on shift, right? And we see that these two are for, right, are for the shift, the pop and the shift are the pop and the shift are for removing elements, and the push and the on shift are for appending elements. So the push insert to the last, and the on shift insert to the first. The pop remove from the last, and the shift remove from the first. So one thing that we'll also look at is what we call the higher order function. So if I say the higher order function, I'm talking about the map. Okay.
My first question starts with the keywords.
Okay.
From that point, I saw that we have both the let and var are defined based on the scope, either it is block scope or function scope.
Yeah.
What about the const? Does it have any scope, or is general?
Yes. So the let and the const are block scope. Yes, they are all block scope. So the let and the const are block scope, but the var is a function scope.
Okay.
So the var can be reused outside the function. Yes, but the let and the const, they are unless you have a valid reason to use the var, but otherwise you should prefer to use the let and the const. Yeah.
Normally when you try using the var, you are leaking some of you're leaking some of your variables too. Like they call it a global thing. So anybody at all or anywhere you stand on the program, you can have access to that global variable, okay, which is very bad, which is very so unless you have a good reason that, oh, I want to access this value anywhere, then you can use that var. Other than that, you have no reason to use var. Use let instead. Yeah.
All right. This will be the end of our tutorial. All right. Thank you.